goodness, thank you for the stillness. I have to be honest, I feel very humbled right now, feeling that anything that I say is just going to wreck it. It's so thick when we gather like this. For me, sometimes my experience feels like the inside of my head is just being sucked in to a point of nothingness. And I have nothing to say. I go through this cycle of death and rebirth every time I sit with people. I may have some ideas, but in the sit, it just gets destroyed. And it's back to zero. And then if something comes, it's a grace. But the invitation here is simply stillness. Silence, but sometimes I like the word stillness more because it gives this sense of alertness in it. So when we gather like this, it's about the stillness. It's about awareness. The awareness of stillness. It's about presence. The presence of stillness. And the simplicity is to recognize that that stillness, that presence, that awareness is what you are, what we are. When we gather and we sit and we meditate, we can sense into that silence, that stillness, the presence, and of course we feel the presence. We can say awareness is the pure clarity of stillness with no qualities except awareing. The presence we can feel, especially in the body, everywhere. It's in the body, but the invitation here is to recognize that it holds the body. It holds the room. It holds the universe. And so there's that invitation to fall back into that stillness that witnesses our experience inside, but it's so big that it can't be contained to the inside. It's inside, but it's outside. And we're so used to referencing our sense of self. So we have thoughts, and of course the natural impulse is we think they're my thoughts. And on some level that's true, because when you're thinking, I can't read your thoughts. I can't know your thoughts. Feelings are the same. So we're different, we're separate in that regard, we're individual. But of course, the invitation of Satsang is to recognize the truth of what we are. And this truth isn't about a concept, and it's not about something outside of you. The truth that we speak about here is you. And when you recognize you at the deepest core, you recognize me. That's the part that isn't separate. And what is that? Well, ultimately, we can't define it. We try so hard with words. We use words like stillness, like silence, like awareness, and we feel the presence of that. We can say things like love and unity and oneness, and still it doesn't get right to it. What is it? It's raw, pure mystery. We can say it's nothingness. But that's not true either, because there's a somethingness to it. Even in the absolute nothingness, we can feel, and especially in moments like this, that velvet, dark emptiness is so thick. So how can we say it's nothing? Because we can feel the somethingness of it. And this is the absolute beauty of true nature and truth and love, is that it's completely paradoxical. It's not either or, it's both and. It's nothing and something. It's individual and universal. And of course, the majority of the teachings, they are starting from the place that we're identified with our mind, our thoughts, our ego. And so the invitation is to get out of there, to recognize there's something more than just you. Your sense of self is me. And there's many paths. The path of inquiry and meditation tends to be relaxing back into the witness. Again, the teaching is only, it only has meaning from the reference point of a me. If you're resting as true nature, the teachings, they don't make sense because you're just it. But when we start with the self, the ego, one of the invitations is to back up and recognize that there's something watching the thoughts. There's thinking happening, and we're usually just so caught in the thought. Emotions happen, we're so caught in the emotions. The feeling, the body sensations of the emotions. The expansion, the contraction, the lightness, the heaviness. But the question is, what is aware of that? And so when we back up into that witness, we can recognize this pure awareing, this pure clarity, this pure perceiving, we can say. And even when we do, the question can come, whose awareness is that? And of course we can say it's my awareness. But if you want to know the secret of awakening and enlightenment, it's simply recognizing in that micro moment of I am experiencing awareness in one instant, and the next instant something shifts. And what's truer is that you are the awareness experiencing you. And we all have these moments. We don't recognize most of them. Most of the time we're alone, maybe in nature. These moments of stillness, clarity. Sometimes we can just feel normal. We feel expanded, possibly. But something just slides into that space. And we often don't even define it. What is it? And we come back from it and we say, well, that was stillness. That was awareness. That was silence. Maybe it's more full. Maybe we experience the fullness of it, so we say it's love, it's unity, it's oneness. But where were you when you were in it? That's the only question. Who am I? What am I? That's where the question is to be asked, in that stillness, in that raw, pure awareness and stillness and presence. Who's experiencing it? Where are you? Not when you're thinking. When you're thinking, you're there as a person. That's fine. That's not the issue. The invitation is to just put a little bit of your attention outside of that. And so when we gather like this to honor that space, that truth in each other, there can be a amplification of that. And if the mind isn't working so well, if it's having a difficulty understanding, that's good. If there's one thing that the space of Satsang is good at doing, it's slowing the mind down. Even these words, I often don't explicitly say this, but listen with stillness. Don't hold on to them too tightly, because if they have any use, they're bringing you to that recognition that's always here. But sometimes we forget. So we come together like this to remember. And to also remember that where I'm speaking from is actually the innermost aspect of you. If we've never come across the non-dual teachings, it can sound funny, but this is the truth. When you go deep, deep inside, and I go deep, deep inside, we bump into each other. In fact, the bumping evaporates you and me, and there's just that. So this is how simple it is. If you've never heard this imitation of simplicity, then I joyfully share this. The end of the path is here, meaning this moment and every moment. But more important than the concept of it is the actual experience. So this moment with a capital M, the now with a capital N, is you as awareness, recognizing yourself as that. That's the end of time. It's a shift in consciousness. And it's at the core of time. It's at the core of experience. And sitting here in silence and stillness with you is so lovely to just hear the wind blowing around. And I just had this sense like we're this little bubble of stillness in the midst of the wind and the chaos. And I invite you to take that metaphor deeply into your experience. The waves of the mind, the emotions. Likewise, at your core is stillness. Of course, it's a little bit of a paradox because that drop of stillness at your core is actually everywhere. It's inside and it's outside. And incredibly, it's actually the space between the inside and the outside too. If there is a boundary that we can experience, it would be the body boundary. But in this context, the body, for it to be recognized as non-separate from the stillness and awareness, it needs to be felt as presence. The reality is the totality of presence, the totality of consciousness actually manifests as a point within its own infinity as our body. And so in this moment, your body, you have the ability to experience your body as the somatic field of presence everywhere. In this context, I talk about awakening a lot, but I also talk about embodiment. And what I mean by embodiment is, first we start with awakeness. So on some level, the invitation and also the expectation is that we can actually wake up, each one of you, right now. It's possible. It's not only possible, I'm sure of it. And the sureness doesn't come from me, it comes from you. When you're looking at me, I know it's looking. We're the same. I'm speaking from the looking. And so I know from my experience what's possible. And I know it's not difficult. We think it is. And unfortunately, our spirituality almost reinforces that it is. That there's this path, there's this progression. And I understand that. I mean, as a non-dual teacher, I feel I encourage practice more than most do. But the practice that I truly invite is to recognize this unbounded stillness and awareness and presence, and then sit as that. The experience of that will come and go, it'll flux, it'll deepen, but just keep sitting. In Zen, they call this practice just sitting. That's the actual name for it. Some Christian traditions, they call it the prayer of the quiet. The truest, deepest prayer is resting as stillness. And the term prayer is an orientation towards that. But the deeper invitation is to recognize actually there's no separation between what I am and that. And that's the simplicity. In every moment, it's that simple. Sometimes we can be graced with a very powerful experience that just blasts us into that, and it's effortless. We don't have to do anything, and it's lovely. It's lovely. The problem with these big experiences, though, is that we feel sometimes that that's what it's all about. It's about getting high all the time, and getting higher and higher and higher. They get it. There's a truth to that on some level. And yet, the more we can develop a taste and a value for simplicity, the better it is for us. Meaning the byproduct is more peace and more freedom and more joy and happiness. Because when we're not chasing the next big boom experience, we can just be here. And we can be available for it. But because we're more orientated to be here as stillness, it can come like a hurricane and we just drink it in. It's lovely. And then it passes away and we're not grasping at it because we know it's more important. The simplicity. And I often speak about the embodiment of the head, heart, and gut. And each of those centers awakening is actually a state of consciousness. So awakened mind basically means the experience of it is you as awareness and stillness and presence, has disidentified from the mind center. So what you can do naturally is rest as awareness, rest as the witness. And so you know yourself as awareness separate from mind and body. Awakened heart is where that witness that's way out here, way back here, and how far back does it go? To infinity. Somehow something shifts where that infinity somehow reconnects itself to the mind-body, to the world, to the universe. And if the question was asked, and we look, what am I? The truth of our experience would be, I am everything. Not me as a person, but me as consciousness. I'm witnessing it, but I'm actually in it. I am it. Everything I look at is somehow mysteriously me. Me as big me. But even in that experience of unity and oneness, there can be a sense of something even simpler and deeper and more fundamental revealing itself to us. And that would be the pure absolute stillness. It's a non-state. So teachers like Ramana would describe true nature as being one with the deep sleep state. And this is the simplicity of what they're speaking about. In deep sleep, there's no content, there's no dreaming. The only thing that's there is awareness. It's awareness transcendent of consciousness. But again, don't let these words confuse. It's simple. It's the looking. Even when the world disappears, there's a looking. Even when everything is surrendering back into that, there's still a looking. And this world, this universe, is the looking. There's not two things. There isn't a something and a world outside. The perceiving is the manifestation. And so in that simplicity, I open the space now and invites you to come forth as that. However that looks for you. It can come forth as a question, a challenge, a sharing, a report. But it doesn't have to. It can just show up and say hello and play. And I love when that happens. We can often feel inside, well, if I don't have anything to say, or if I don't have a question, why would I even engage? And don't worry about it. Just show up. We'll just explore and play. Because in that play, in that inquiry and exploration, is endless. It's not a seeking inquiry. It's just an endless, joyous, ecstatic expression of that. So, thank you everyone for coming tonight and braving the wind and the power outages. I'm glad you showed up, and I'd love to hear what's on your mind.